All right, good morning. This morning we're going to be going over a problem scenario. We're going to take a look at transitioning a large network from static IP addressing to DHCP. A very good friend of mine and mentor reached out to me recently, and he's working for a company that has about 400 machines, from what I understand, at a couple of different branch locations. And they are all statically IP'd, okay, which means manually IP addresses are set on all the machines. They just are, I guess, setting up a DHCP server, and they want to transition all of their networking from static to DHCP. So we're going to talk about how DHCP works and a couple of the considerations that might apply in this scenario. So let's dive right in. Okay, so this is kind of a picture of what I think they have set up. They're going to have a bunch of different LAN segments, right? Most likely plugged into a layer 2 switch of some sort, and then it's going to connect to a layer 3 switch or a router. Okay, so what they want to do right now, all of these are statically IP'd, and they want to set up a DHCP server somewhere to dynamically assign IPs to these machines. All right, so I don't know what subnet they're working with specifically, but let's assume it's 192.168.1.0/24. And just for the purposes of illustration, we'll drop a couple of random IPs in here. Okay, I'm assuming that 192.168.1.1 is their gateway. It might be something else, but that's why I'm starting here with 2 and 3. All right, so right now everything is statically IP'd. They have an IP address, a subnet mask, and a gateway that points to whatever their layer 3 device is, statically assigned to every machine. Okay. Now, in order to change these machines to DHCP, there's a couple of ways to do it. Obviously, there's the manual way, right? You can open up your Ethernet adapter, go into Properties, IPv4, and click the little radio button that says Automatic IP and Automatic DNS. All right. Now, with an environment that has like 400 machines in it, though, that actually takes some effort to have an administrator or a technician go to every single machine to make that change. He asked me if there was an easier way to do it, a more automated way, and I think there is. My first thought was to just create a GPO, right? All of these machines are domain joined, so we could create a group policy object and tell it just to pull DHCP. I did a little bit of research as I was thinking about it, and it turns out that's one of the few settings that you cannot change via a GPO. Okay, you cannot set a NIC or a network interface card to pull a DHCP address via GPO. Okay, so I started thinking about it. There is another way to do it, but first we're going to talk about how DHCP works. Okay, so they're wanting to put in a DHCP server. Okay, now typically I did ask the question if he was using a network device to do DHCP or if it was going to be a server. From what I understand, it's going to be Microsoft server running the DHCP role. Okay. That being said, it's probably going to be on a separate subnet than the subnet it's providing IP addresses for. Okay, and that provides a couple of challenges. But just to explain DHCP, we're gonna pretend that that's not the case. Let's move this around real quick. We're going to pretend that the DHCP server is on the same subnet as the machines. Okay, so the way DHCP typically works, as soon as you plug in a machine or set it to obtain automatically, or one way or the other establish a connection, right? You have link lights. One of the first things that machine is going to do is it's going to send a broadcast message. Okay, a broadcast meaning everything on the subnet is going to hear that message. Okay, and that message is basically going to say, is there any DHCP server on this network that I can get an IP from? Okay, if the DHCP server is on the same subnet, it's going to hear that broadcast message and it's going to respond back, hey, I'm a DHCP server and I can issue you IPs. Then they're going to go through a negotiation process. Okay, there's a few steps in that. And ultimately, the DHCP server will send it a package including IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, DNS information, all of that sort of thing. All right, but if the DHCP server is not on the same subnet, if it's on the other side of a layer 3 device of any sort, whether that's a switch or a router, that DHCP server is not going to hear a broadcast message. okay, because it's on a different subnet. So a consideration that you need to take into account is you have to configure something called an IP helper. Okay, what the IP helper does is when a broadcast message is sent out, okay, and the DHCP server is not on the same subnet, it's not going to be able to respond to the broadcast. Okay, so what you have to do is on your layer 3 device, or preferably whatever device is hosting the gateway for your LAN, you're going to configure an IP helper. What that does is it tells this layer 3 device, if you receive a broadcast message for DHCP, okay, I want you to snatch it and relay that over to this IP address. Okay, so it's going to lift that request off of the LAN it came from and send it unicast to the DHCP server. The DHCP server will then learn who is asking for that IP, and it will reach directly back to the machine saying, I'm your guy, I can help you out. Okay, so it's important to have an IP helper configured on every layer 3 device. Okay, and this is important in this scenario because they're going to have to do it on the layer 3 device at every single branch that they're hooking up. Okay, so there's that. Now, another consideration. If kind of my approach, or at least my first thought was to do it via GPO, but now that I know you can't do that, the approach is going to be to configure each of these machines to use DHCP via a script. Okay, there's a very, very simple batch script that you can write, and I'll get into that in a second, that shows you exactly how to configure this machine. I think the one I wrote is exactly 4 lines. It's very simple. The problem is, we need, if we're going to be doing this via a script, we need to kind of synchronize the time of this cutover. Okay, and here's why. If we're not changing subnets, which I assume we're not. Actually, let me touch on that real quick. Let's say, for example, during this transition, if we were able to transition from 192.168.1.0 to something like 192.168.2.0, right? So the 1.0 is what's statically assigned, and then DHCP is going to start issuing out 2.0 addresses. The easy day, right? What I don't know, though, is if this company is able to actually change their IP space that they're operating in, or even if they want to. But that would be probably the best way to make sure that there's no IP conflicts, okay? But I'm going to assume that's not the case and that they have to stay within the IP space that they're using. So if, let's say on this guy, okay, I go manually change it, or I run the script and tell him to start using DHCP, and your IP helper set up and everything's already good. What's going to happen is he's going to ask the DHCP server for an IP address, okay? The DHCP server has no idea that all of these machines are statically configured, okay? All he knows is that currently he has an address pool that he can issue IPs from, and that he hasn't issued any out yet, right? So when this machine requests an IP address, he's going to issue, the DHCP server is going to issue the first IP address that's available in his pool. Okay, assuming that the gateway is 192.168.1.1 on this layer 3 device, he's going to skip over that one. All right, he's going to issue the first IP in the pool, which is this 192.168.1.2. That creates a problem for us because right now, in this moment, we have a duplicate IP address. The same IP address is assigned to 2 machines. This doesn't work. Okay. Now, as these other machines continue to cut over, right, one at a time or in some kind of sequence, you're going to get more and more IP conflicts because this guy's going to get assigned .3, right, which might already be assigned here, so on and so forth. So we have to find a way to kind of defeat that. And there's a way to do it. It just takes a little bit of planning and it takes some coordination. Okay. What we're going to try to do is write a script that will run on all of these machines at almost the exact same time. Because if all of these machines switch from static assignment to dynamic assignment at the same time, they're all going to release their static IP address in one moment, and then they're all going to ask for an address from DHCP. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to my domain controller. What we're going to do is we're going to write a group policy that I'm going to move. Let's see. We're going to write a group policy that will run a script on machine startup. Okay, so when these machines reboot, they're going to go from static IP addressing to dynamic IP addressing. Okay, so as you can see here, I already have my my group policy management snap-in open. You're going to want to drill down into your group policy objects folder, and we're going to create a policy. Let me delete this one. Okay, so I'm going to right click there and hit new GPO. When you name your GPOs, you want to make sure that it's something descriptive. That way 6 years from now, when you come back and you don't remember doing this, you know exactly what the purpose of this group policy is. Okay, so I'm going to name this startup script DHCP transition. Okay, that's it, something descriptive. And then I'm going to open that guy up. As you can see, there's no settings configured right now, okay? But we're about to do some configuration. If you go over to the Details tab, you also have here, and this will come in just a second, you have this GUID, right, or this unique ID. Every time you create a group policy object, it actually creates a folder inside the sysvol, okay, on the domain. The sysvol is the folder that gets replicated to all the other domain controllers, okay? So anytime you create a group policy, gets put in this folder, all the settings get put in this folder, and anything related to that group policy should be put in that folder. Another example would be if you're doing a desktop background GPO, if you want to set the desktop background on all your machines, all your workstations, you can put the JPEG file that is the background inside that folder, right? That way the image itself gets replicated across your domain and is present on all the domain controllers. All right. Another way to do it, which I do not prefer, you could put that image on like a share drive or something, but then if that share drive goes down or there's any network connectivity, loss of connectivity to that share drive, the policy won't work. But if it's inside the GPO, then as long as you have one functioning domain controller, this policy will be able to execute. Okay, so take a note of that GUID, and we'll touch on that in just a second. So we're going to go back to settings, right click, hit edit, and start configuring some stuff. All right, the setting we're looking for is going to be under computer configuration, and then policies, and then Windows settings, and then right here you see scripts, startup and shutdown. We're going to go into there, double click on startup, and it opens up this little window. We're going to click add, and it's going to ask us for the script name. Okay, if you click on browse, it's going to open up a folder, and if you note here, remember that GUID we said to take note of? It opened us up inside the GPO, inside the actual group policy object by default, okay? So inside this folder is where we want our actual script to be, okay? Now, we're going to leave that open for just a second, and we're going to actually take a look at our script. All right, so as you can see, I have a Notepad document open. To write this script, it's as simple as opening Notepad. The first line is REM. It's just a remark. It kind of tells you what the script does. And then the first command is netshell interface IP set address. There's a name of the adapter, and I'll touch on that in a second, and then DHCP. So it says to set the IP address to DHCP for this adapter. Okay, and then this fourth line says netshell interface IP set DNS DHCP. So we're telling it to set the IP address and the DNS settings using DHCP. Okay, now with this name, you're supposed to use the name of the connection that you're configuring. Okay, some machines have multiple adapters. Some machines have just one adapter, but from machine to machine, you might have different names, okay? The default name for a long time was local area connection 1 or local area connection or local area connection 8 or something like that. So what I did here for the name is I put the asterisk, the word connection, and then an asterisk, which means anything before or after the word connection will get caught by this wildcard, okay? Some machines use a different naming standard and it'll just say Ethernet or Ethernet 5 or something to that effect. So by specifying the wildcard for connection and the wildcard for Ethernet, it's going to capture all of the possible adapter names. Okay. Now, consideration here: if your workstations have more than one adapter, okay, and one of them is going to be DHCP and the other static, or something to that effect, you might want to think twice before running this, because this is going to set every adapter to DHCP. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So once you have these 4 commands, which basically does 2 things, it sets the IP, it sets the DNS for 2 different possible naming standards. We're going to go to File and Save As in Notepad, change the Save As file type to All Files, name your script. I used set DHCP, and then do .dat at the end. Okay, that designates this file as an executable batch file. Okay, so we're going to save that and close it. I saved that to my desktop, so I'm going to copy that from my desktop. Come on now. And I'm going to paste it into this folder inside the GPO. I'm going to select it and click Open, and you can see that it populated my script name right there. Hit Apply. All right, and then I'm going to close out the editor and refresh my GPO to make sure that all that took. Okay, so see, now we have actual configurations set up inside this GPO. The next step is to attach this GPO to an organizational unit that contains our workstations. Okay, I highly, highly recommend at this point you take one of your machines at one of your branches, create a brand new OU in your Active Directory structure, and put that machine in there. Then attach this GPO to that OU and test it. Okay, if it works, that's great. Okay, in order for it to work, it needs that IP helper configured. It needs to be able to reach the DHCP server, so on and so forth. What this GPO is going to do is run that script when the computer starts. So all you have to do is do a GP update on that test computer and then reboot it. If when it reboots, it's running DHCP and it actually pulls an IP address, then that indicates that branch is good to cut over. Okay, which means you can apply that GPO now to that whole branch's OU and schedule a restart at the same time. Okay, you want to restart all of your machines at once. That way we don't have that duplicate IP problem that we spoke about a moment ago. And I recommend doing it one branch at a time, just to make sure that the IP helper works. Okay, so one test machine per branch, make sure it works. And then that Friday night or whenever is convenient, once the workforce is kind of out of the office, do a remote reboot on all of your machines. There's a trick to that too. From your domain controller, if you open up a command prompt and issue the shutdown tac-i command, okay, that's going to be an interactive shutdown. It's going to open up this little window. You can add as many computer names or IP addresses as you want here. Okay, tell it to restart. You can give it a reason, and then say go. Okay, this is a way to remotely reboot lots of machines at the same time. So you want all of these machines to reboot at the same time so that they all release their IPs and then pull a new one at the same time. Make sure you test. Okay, that's my greatest warning. Make sure you test this and make sure it works on one machine per branch, because if you don't, if you apply this wide without testing it, and for whatever reason it doesn't pull an IP, whether that be because of a DHCP server problem, lack of an IP helper, or anything, okay, all of your machines are going to pull what's called an PIPA IP address, okay, and a PIPA. If your machines pull in a PIPA IP address, they're not going to be able to communicate on the network. You're going to lose remote connectivity if that's how you're doing it. Long story short, it's going to require a technician to go sit down at every machine anyway, right? And the whole purpose of this is to avoid that. So make sure you test it. Make sure it works before you apply it to your whole environment. But I hope this problem scenario discussion helps. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment down on the bottom. And if you have any other problem scenarios that you think I would like, or you would like me to go over, just let me know and I'll get to it.